We had to abandon the carriage. Kaelen's horse was the only one that survived the ambush, so we rode double, my thighs aching from straddling the beast, my back pressed against Kaelen's chest. His arm was a steel band around my waist, keeping me steady. We arrived at a hunting lodge on the border of his lands just as the sun began to set. It was a rustic, single-room structure, dusty from disuse. Kaelen kicked the door shut and immediately began stripping off his wet shirt. I turned away, trying to ignore the play of muscles across his back, the latticework of scars that told the history of his violent life. "There's only one bed," he stated flatly. "Of course there is," I muttered. The universe, or perhaps Oberon, had a sense of humor. I struggled with the laces of my gown. The water had made the knots impossible. I'm stuck. Kaelen walked over. I felt his heat before his touch. His fingers brushed my spine, sending shivers that had nothing to do with the cold. He worked the laces with surprising patience. "You have powerful friends," he said quietly. "Fae, the Unseelie Court. Something like that. They call themselves the Organization. And what did you pay for their protection?" "My father paid a debt long ago. Now I'm considered family." The dress pooled at my feet. I stood in my thin chemise, shivering. Kaelen turned me around. His gaze dropped to my lips, then lower, taking in the curve of my breasts beneath the damp linen. The air in the cabin grew stiflingly hot. "I expected to hate you," Kaelen admitted, his voice rough. "I expected a spy, a weakness. And no." He reached out, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. "Now I think you are the most dangerous thing I've ever encountered." He kissed me then, and it wasn't like the performance at the cathedral. This was raw hunger. I tangled my fingers in his wet hair, pulling him closer. He lifted me effortlessly, walking us backward until my legs hit the mattress. We fell onto the furs, a tangle of limbs in desperate need. His skin was fire against mine. I wanted him. I realized with a shock that I had wanted him since he first looked at me with that dark, brooding scowl. But just as his hand slid up my thigh, a sharp, rhythmic tapping echoed from the window. "Tab, tab, tab." Kaelen groaned, pulling back, his forehead resting against mine. "Tell me that isn't one of your relatives." I looked over his shoulder. Perched on the windowsill was a crow with a golden ring in its beak. It tapped again, insistent. "It's a messenger," I said, breathless. Kaelen cursed and moved off me, though he kept a possessive hand on my ankle. I went to the window and opened it. The crow dropped the ring into my palm and croaked, "The soup is cold." Repeat, "The soup is cold." My blood turned to ice. It was code. "What is it?" Kaelen asked, sensing my shift in mood. He was already reaching for his sword. "It means treason," I said, turning to him. "It means we aren't safe here. The ambush wasn't just your brother. Someone inside your inner circle opened the gates." Kaelen's face hardened into a mask of fury. "Who?" "I don't know," I said, gripping the ring. It bore the crest of his own personal guard, "but they're coming tonight." Kaelen looked at the door, then back at me. "You need to leave. Take the horse. I'll hold them off." "No. Elara, don't be stubborn. If they find you." "If they find me, they'll regret it," I snapped. I walked back to him, placing my hand on his chest, right over his heart. "I'm not running, Kaelen. We're married. That means your enemies are my enemies, and my family. They handle enemies very effectively." He looked at me, conflict warring in his eyes. Finally, he covered my hand with his. "If we survive this night, Elara, I promise you, I will give you everything." "Let's survive first," I said. "Do you trust me?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Yes." "Good." I closed my eyes and whispered the words Oberon had taught me, the words that summoned the heavy hitters. Outside, the wind began to howl, and the shadows of the trees detached themselves from the ground, standing tall and straightening their ties.
Want to keep the flame ignited without having to wait for the next part? You can find the full, tantalizing tale on our main page. See the link in the description.